You've just spent $50,000 on your kitchen. New cabinets, quartz countertops, those professional grade appliances you convinced yourself you needed. You did it right. You didn't cut corners. You even went a little bit beyond budget, but you've already come this far. It looks incredible. And then a few years later, you sell the house. And when you actually sit down and actually look at what that kitchen added to your sale price, really look at the numbers, you realize something really uncomfortable. You get about half of it back, maybe less. Now hold on to that because I want to introduce you to someone else, a house flipper. They buy a rundown house with a kitchen that's worse than yours before the renovation. Dated cabinets, laminate countertops from 1991, a floor that's seen better decades. They gut it, they renovate it, and then they sell and they make money. So here's the question. How does a flipper renovate a kitchen and make money where a homeowner renovates a kitchen and loses it? Same market, same buyers, same materials. What do they know that you don't? And more importantly, what can you learn from them? That's what this video is about. But I have to warn you up front, the flipper is not the hero of this story. They're more like a professional who teaches something genuinely valuable while being someone you'd never fully trust. Because the flipper's mental model is right, and their methods are sometimes not. But buried inside how they think about renovation and value is a framework that every homeowner, every buyer, every seller should understand. So let's get into it. Now let's start with the homeowner because their instinct isn't crazy, it's just based upon a story we've been told that doesn't match reality. Now for decades, the message around home renovations has been consistent. Your home is the most important investment. Improve it, upgrade it, money you put into it will come back when you sell. HGTV built an empire on this idea. Every show follows the same arc. Ugly house in, beautiful house out. The before and after is the entire payoff. But here's what every one of those shows has in common. They end at the reveal. Nobody comes back 3 years later to run the actual numbers. The financial reality is boring and is never the story because it would ruin the story. So what does the data actually say? Well, every year, cost versus value style reports break down how much common projects really add in resale. A minor kitchen remodel, think painted cabinets, new hardware, modest countertops, can sometimes recoup 80 to even 90% of what it costs. But once you cross into major kitchen remodels, the numbers change. Major mid-range kitchen remodels typically get back 40 to 55% of what they cost. Upscale luxury kitchen remodels often recoup closer to 35 to 40%. Not 100, not 80, often something like half. Which means if you spend $50,000 on a full kitchen remodel, the national average suggests you might only see $25,000 to $30,000 of that show up in the retail price. The rest is just gone. And here's the part that really stings. The more you spend, the worse your percentage return tends to be. High-end luxury renovations are regularly among the worst ROI projects, while simpler mid-range updates often rank near the top. More modest updates do better, sometimes getting back 80 or even 90 cents on the dollar. So the more passionate you renovate, the more money you tend to lose. And there is a brutal irony in that. So why? Why does the market so stubbornly refuse to give back what was put into it? Think about a 15-year-old car. You've got a 2009 Honda Accord. Solid car, but it has age on it. Now you decide to fix everything. New transmission, rebuilt engine, and you spend $15,000 on it. What's it worth when you go to sell? Well, it's worth what a 2009 Honda Accord is worth. The market has already decided what a car of this age and model go for. Your receipts don't matter. The hours you spend on it doesn't matter. The market looks at it and says, old car, priced accordingly. And houses work almost exactly the same way. When you've got a 30-year-old kitchen and pour $50,000 into it, the market doesn't see a brand new kitchen in a new house, it sees a renovated kitchen in an old house. The bones are the bones, the neighborhood is the neighborhood. No amount of quartz countertops changes what the house fundamentally is. When a buyer walks into your renovated kitchen, they don't see what you see. You see every decision you agonized over, every conversation with the contractor, the Saturday at the tile showroom. The buyer sees a nice kitchen. Full stop. They're making a gut level call in about 30 seconds and then they move on to the next room. They're not adding up your costs. They're not giving you credit for the premium appliances. Your attachment inflates your sense of value. Their detachment deflates it. and the market sides with the buyer. The market is stingy when you overspend. Not malicious, not irrational, just completely indifferent to the story you told yourself about why it's worth what it is. Think about celebrity real estate. A celebrity buys a house for, let's say, $1 million. And then they pour $20 million into the house, custom everything, amenities designed for a luxurious life. And when they sell, it's very common for the sale price to be a fraction of what they put into it, sometimes wiping out millions of dollars of renovation spend. How? Why? Well, because the pool of buyers for a $20 million custom house is tiny. They didn't build the house for the market, they built it for themselves. And when it came time to sell, almost no buyer matched their specific needs. And when it came time to sell, almost no buyer's life matched what they had created. The more personal and specific the renovation, the smaller the buyer pool. The smaller the buyer pool, the lower the price. Of course, this is an extreme version of what happens every day in every market at every price point. The homeowner who renovates for their own taste is always paying some version of the celebrity tax. The discipline that protects you from this, and it is a discipline, is the ability to make decisions based upon what a wide range of future buyers will want, not just what you and your spouse want right now. This sounds cold, and it is a little cold, but to the extent that you can practice it, you come out far ahead when you sell. The homeowner who can't practice it, who renovates purely from emotional, purely for themselves, will always pay a price when it's time to move on. But here's where it gets interesting and a little bit unfair, because the market just doesn't punish homeowners who overspend, it also punishes homeowners who don't renovate at all, and it punishes them harder. If a buyer walks into a house with a dated 1987 kitchen, one that needs, say, $30,000 of work to bring it up to today's standards, how much will buyers knock off their offer? Now, if people were perfectly rational, the answer would be $30,000. Maybe $35,000 with a cushion for hassle, but that's not what happens. Buyers don't think in contractor estimates. They think in anxiety, and they imagine the worst case scenario. They picture everything they might find once the walls come open. They think about living through a renovation, going over budget, which they've heard always happens, and months of disruption with no end in sight. And so, a $30,000 problem gets priced like a $60,000 or $70,000 or $80,000 problem. But it's not just about the kitchen. A dated kitchen is a signal. One outdated kitchen becomes a referendum on the entire property. Buyers start asking questions that they weren't asking before. When was the roof last replaced? What about the heating and air? If the kitchen looks like this, what does the plumbing look like? The kitchen that costs $30,000 to fix ends up taking $60,000 or $70,000 off the offer, because fear builds on itself, and a buyer's imagination, when left to fill the blanks, almost always fills them expensively. The market is brutal when you underspend. It's not just that you don't get credit for the renovation you skipped, you actually get punished at a rate that often exceeds what the renovation would have cost. This is a situation facing a lot of boomer era homes right now. Not because the homeowners were negligent, they bought a house, they lived their lives, and never thought renovation as a strategic decision. They thought of it the way that most people do. Something you do when something breaks, or when you find something you can't stand anymore. But the market doesn't care about any of that. It just sees what's there on the day the house goes up for sale. So we learned that the market is stingy when you overspend, renovate too much and you get maybe 50 cents on the dollar, and the market is brutal when you underspend. Don't renovate at all, and you lose more than the renovation would have cost. So same market, same buyers, cutting completely in opposite directions. Now, people often hear this and reach for the Goldilocks idea. Not too much and not too little. Goldilocks implies that there's one perfect point you're trying to hit. A better picture is a plateau. Imagine a wide flat surface with a drop-off on either side. On the left is neglect. The house hasn't been maintained. The kitchen is from 1987. The carpet is original. The paint is peeling. Buyers walk in and fear takes over. They knock far more off the offer than the actual cost of the work, or they walk away entirely. I've met with a ton of these sellers of these homes who don't understand why they can't get the same price of their neighbor's house. This is why. On the right side is over improvement. You put in the chef's kitchen, the spa bathroom, the custom everything. You made every decision for yourself or some fantasy buyer who shares your exact taste with unlimited money. The market looks at your $100,000 renovation and hands you back $50,000 at closing. You've fallen off the right side just as steep, just in a different direction. I've met with sellers and have to give them the bad news that their kitchen won't help their house price as much as they thought it would. The plateau in the middle space is where the market rewards you. And here's the good news. It's actually reasonably wide. You don't have to be perfect, you just have to stay on it, renovated enough to give buyers confidence, restricted enough to not spend money the market won't return. Most bad renovation decisions, whether from neglect or from over-enthusiasm, are really just failures to stay on the plateau. The homeowner who never touched the kitchen fell off the left side, and the homeowner who put a sub-zero appliances in and Italian marble fell off the right side. So the goal is to stay on the plateau. And it's more forgiving than you think and more punishing when you leave it than most people expect. So why does behavior cut this hard in both directions? Why does fear discount so aggressively on one end and indifference cap the return so firmly on the other? The answer is one of the most important things I can tell you about real estate. This is one of the most emotional purchases people will make. And if you don't understand that, truly understand that, you will lose. But if you do understand it, you can win and win big. Think about what happens when a buyer walks into a house. They're not running spreadsheets, they're having a feeling. They're imagining their life. They're feeling safe or they're feeling anxious. They're falling in love or they're headed for the exit. That feeling, not the square footage, not the price per square foot, not the comparables, is what drives the offer. Most homeowners understand this when they're buying, but when they're selling or renovating, they completely forget it. They start thinking about what they want, what they like, and what feels right to them. They stop thinking about what the future buyer is gonna feel when they walk through that door. So if you're renovating purely based upon your own taste, what you love, what your spouse has always wanted, well, you're making decisions that won't serve you financially. You are optimizing for the wrong person's feelings. But if you understand what your future buyer needs to feel, confidence instead of anxious, certain instead of scared, excited instead of skeptical, that's not cold or calculating, that's just understanding what you're doing when you renovate a home you're eventually going to sell. Because I don't know if you know this, but eventually you're gonna have to sell. Or your heirs are. And nobody understands this better than the flipper. The flipper is not the hero of this story. They're more like a very effective person who plays a game you might not want to play exactly how they play it. But they do have the right mental model. And they often cut corners, and what they can teach you is genuinely valuable as long as you understand where the lesson ends and the cautionary tale begins. So how does a flipper think about a house? Not the way most homeowners do. When you look at a house, you think about where you'd want to live, where the kitchen matches your style. When a flipper looks at a house, they ask completely different questions. What is this house worth right now to a small group of buyers who consider it in the current condition? And what would it be worth after targeted improvements to a much wider group of buyers? And what's the least I need to spend to get from the first situation to the second? And that last question is everything. The flipper isn't trying to build the best kitchen. They're trying to build the minimum kitchen that gets the house over that threshold, because that shift in feeling is where the value gets created. Not in premium appliances, not in custom cabinetry. In the moment when the buyer walks in and say, I can live here. Two questions that people ask when renovating. The homeowner asks, what do I need? They're solving for themselves, their own taste, their own life in that space. The 6-burner range because they love to cook, the tile that they fell in love on the showroom floor. The renovation serves them, and that's the whole purpose. The flipper asks, what does a buyer need? They're solving for the largest possible group of buyers at that price point in that neighborhood, because most buyers don't look elaborately and won't pay extra for upgrades. The tile that photographs well and reads as nice on a quick walkthrough. Solving for yourself is a lifestyle decision. Solving for your buyer is a financial decision. Most homeowners make lifestyle decisions when they're telling themselves they're making financial ones. That gap between what they spend and what the market gives back is where tens of thousands of dollars quietly disappear. You don't have to choose one or the other, but you do need to understand what you're doing at the moment and what it's going to cost you. Quartz countertops that photograph beautifully but cost a fraction of marble or granite. Stainless steel appliances that look premium in photos but are actually mid-range. Fresh paint throughout, which has a near absurd payback relative to its cost. New light fixtures, landscaping that makes the front of the house look cared for. None of it is top of the line. All of it reads as new, clean, and maintained. In the buyer's emotional world, that's the only thing that matters. On the buying side, the flipper is specifically hunting for sellers being crushed by that brutal downside market we just talked about. The divorce situation where no one wants to spend money on a house that's about to be split anyways. These sellers face a tiny aggressive pool of buyers who know the seller is stuck and price accordingly. The fear discount is running full force. The flipper walks in with cash, no financing conditions, a fast close, and a certainty. The seller, exhausted and wanting to be over, takes the deal. They buy low from people who are desperate to sell and sell high to people who want the convenience of move-in ready. The profit lives in the gap between these two groups, and it's a real gap in every market all the time. That's the mental model. It works because the flipper has done something that most homeowners will never do. They completely remove their own feelings from the transaction and the house and replace them with a clear-eyed read of what the market actually rewards. Now let's be honest about the part of the story that's harder to tell, because the flipper logic described the way I described it sounds almost admirable. Efficient, logical, finding gaps between what a distressed house sells for and what a fixed one sells for and bridging it. But that logic contains some temptation. The flipper's interests are not the same as the buyer's. The flipper makes money at the closing table and then moves on. They're optimizing for how good things look, not necessarily how good things are. And there's a meaningful, sometimes very expensive difference between those two things. Fresh cabinets look exactly like new cabinets in listing photos. Cosmetic updates can hide deferred maintenance rather than fixing them. A beautiful kitchen can distract from an aging roof or plumbing that's quietly corroding behind the walls. The worst flippers are selling you a movie set, gorgeous services over unresolved problems. And the buyer, won over by those quartz and the subway tile, doesn't look behind the curtain. Is the plumbing behind that beautiful backsplash actually up to code? Sometimes yes. Sometimes absolutely not. I want to be fair here. Not every flipper operates this way. There are flippers who do exceptional work, who pull permits, hire qualified contractors, and fix the invisible things even when no one else will ever see them, because they know their reputation is on the line in a market they plan to keep on working in. These people are genuinely providing a service to the public. But as a whole, the flipping industry doesn't serve buyers. It serves itself. After closing, the house is yours, and so are all the problems that the renovation covered up. The way the business is structured, it naturally tilts away from the buyer's interest. And that's just the honest truth. So what can we learn from all this? Lesson 1, think about the whole house, not just about the kitchen. Most homeowners think about renovation project by project. The kitchen, the bathroom, the floors, individual decisions made one at a time. What they almost never do is think about the house as a complete experience, the way a buyer will move through it from the driveway to the back door. Where does the buyer feel good? Where does he feel anxious? What's the emotional story of the showing? They walk through a house building a mental map of a buyer feeling what works and what doesn't, and what actually shifts perception. Homeowners who learn to think this way, even partially, even just before doing a renovation decision, will make drastically better choices than ones who renovate room by room based upon what they personally like to change. Lesson number 2, know where the baseline is before you spend anything. The flipper's first move is never to pick out tile. It's to understand what buyers in that market at that price point consider the bare minimum. What will they penalize you for not having? What are they completely indifferent to no matter how much you spend on it? Most homeowners skip this step entirely. They renovate based upon their taste or inspiration or what their friends did. They never ask what the market actually wants. Or worse, they assume that all work is good work and never give it a second thought. A good realtor, not a Zestimate, an actual experienced agent who knows your specific neighborhood and price range can tell you what the baseline is. That conversation before any contractors gets involved is worth more than any estimate you'll get. I'm connected to a huge network of realtors who are happy to give you input on renovation, even if you aren't planning on selling for years. Lesson 3, the market rewards positioning, not spending. This is the deepest thing that Flipper understands and most homeowners never do. The market doesn't care what you spend. It doesn't read your receipts. It doesn't know you agonized over cabinet hardware for 3 weeks. What it cares about is where your house sits relative to what buyers expect. Are you below the baseline, spending money that the market will never return? Position matters more than spending. And once you understand that, you stop asking, how much do I spend, and start asking, where's the line and how do I reach it as efficiently as possible? Lesson number 4, renovate for life, but know what you're paying for. If you renovate your kitchen because you love to cook and want a beautiful space and you're gonna live in that kitchen for the next 8 years, that's a completely legitimate reason to spend the money. money. The payoff is in the life you live there, but not the sale price. But you have to be honest with yourself about that. You can't renovate for lifestyle and tell yourself it's a financial investment. It's one or the other. And that gap between those two stories is $50,000 worth of expectations. And if you're gonna renovate for you and your family's needs and not the market, here's the one rule I'd offer you. Renovate in the first third of your time in a home, about twice as long as in the mid-2000s. Do significant work in year 1 through 3. Live in it. Get your value out of it. Renovating in year 9 because you're thinking about what buyers want? Well, now you're paying for the next owner's life. You lose money and you won't even enjoy the kitchen. Here's the habit that quietly protects you. Always ready to sell. In the book, The Millionaire Next Door, that studied quiet, wealthy Americans, not the flashy rich, but people who built real wealth over ordinary lifetimes, one pattern that the authors highlight is how frugal, maintenance-oriented many of these households were. They avoided debt, they kept big purchases conservative, and generally stayed on top of expenses instead of letting them pile up. They were almost always ready to sell. Not actually listing, not moving every few years, just maintaining their house in a condition where, if the right reason came along, a job change, a life event, the right offer, they could act. The lion's share of the work was already done. Most homeowners don't think about selling until something forces them to. A job relocation, a new baby, a divorce, a health event. Life rarely arrives on a convenient timeline. And when these moments hit while you're living in a house with a dated kitchen or deferred maintenance and a to-do list you never got to, you face a brutal truth. Sell as is and take the buyer fear discount, or delay life change when you renovate with all the cost, time, and stress that comes with that. Neither option is good. Both are expensive, and both were preventable. The renovation you do in a year or two on your own timeline without a sale deadline looming is a completely different experience than the renovation you're forced into in year 9 because you got that job offer you couldn't pass up. In year 2, you get to live in it, you get the lifestyle value, you make the decisions calmly with good contractors with competitive prices. In year 9, you're rushed, paying premium work to get the work done fast, and making decisions under pressure you'll second guess until closing. The discipline isn't to renovate consistently, it's to never let the gap between your current condition and the market ready get so large that the closing becomes a crisis. If you had a compelling reason to sell your house 6 months from today, what would you need to do to be ready? If the answer is not much, you're in good shape. If the answer is a lot, that gap is a risk sitting quietly in the background of your biggest asset. The flipper understands this instinctively. They never let a project drift. The millionaires next door understood it too. The homeowners who get caught flat-footed by life change usually didn't. Before we close, I want to be honest about where this framework breaks down, because it does. There are renovations that constantly break this rule. Adding a bedroom or a bathroom, finishing a basement, converting an attic into usable space, building a garage into an apartment. These tend to drastically outperform the typical renovation return. Why? Because they change what category the house is in. A 3-bedroom house and a 4-bedroom house are different products to different buyers. You're not just refinishing, you're repositioning. And repositioning is exactly where the real value lies. In many cost versus value breakdowns, projects that actually add usable space or additional bedrooms and baths routinely outperform cosmetic projects in percentage of cost recovered. If your house doesn't have something that essentially every comparable home in the market has, an open floor plan, a second bathroom, a functional outdoor space, you're not getting ahead of the market, you're catching up to it. Removing a penalty almost always has a better return than adding a luxury. Big ticket items, roofs, heating, air, plumbing, electrical, are in their own category. They don't tend to add value in the way a kitchen might. But if they're failing or near their end of service life, they destroy value far beyond what the repair would cost. A buyer who discovers a roof with 3 years of life left doesn't just subtract the replacement costs from their offer. They're starting to wonder what else hasn't been maintained, and that anxiety reprices the entire house. Those systems need to have foreseeable life left. A 30-year-old heat pump that technically still runs isn't going to reassure anybody. Expect to take a hit on price when buyers and their inspectors find it. Fix functional and the return goes up. Fix services and the return goes down. If you're considering buying a dated home, you may be sitting in front of one of the best opportunities in the current market. A dated home with good bones in a solid neighborhood, priced to reflect buyer anxiety, can be a real find if you go with eyes wide open. Understand what the house will be worth once updated and whether the current price plus your renovation costs actually leave you with room. Hire a thorough inspector, not a checkbox one. Someone who will tell you what's actually there. The value is real, so is the risk of getting it wrong. Have the basic baseline conversation with a good agent before you spend anything. So let's come back to where we started. A homeowner can spend $50,000 in the kitchen and only get half of it back. And a flipper who renovated a worse kitchen makes money doing it. The difference was never about the kitchen. It was the questions they asked before they picked up the hammer. The flipper asks, what does a buyer need this space to be, and what is the least I have to spend to get there? And those are completely different questions, and they lead to completely different outcomes. Real estate is one of the most emotional markets in the world. Buyers make decisions with their gut, their heart, their imagination of a life not yet lived. That's not gonna change, it's human. But here's the thing to understand about emotion. Once you understand it, you can design for it. You can stop renovating for your own feelings and start renovating for future buyers' feelings. You can stop guessing whether the market will reward your spending and start understanding exactly what it rewards. The market doesn't reward spending. It rewards positioning. It doesn't pay for your receipts. It pays for where your house sits in the buyer's emotional world, whether you're below the threshold triggering fear, right at it triggering confidence, or above it spending money the market won't fully return. The flipper figured out where that threshold is and built a business model around it. But the way they think about renovation and value is one of the most honest reads on how this market actually works that exists anywhere in the industry. You don't need to be flipper to use it, but you do need to ask the right questions before you renovate. Not what do I want, but what does the market reward and how do I reach it without going past it? That question is worth $50,000, maybe more. Subscribe for more tips.